Today's guest has sat on 74 boards or even more than that, I think, coined a trademark role that no one else in the world holds, and spent 40 years being the most powerful person in the room that nobody outside the room ever knew about. Please welcome the one, the only Dennis Cagan, Shadow CEO.
Was the worst year for a lot of us for our mental as well as physical health. So joining us this morning is best-selling author, coach Lisa Goldenthal.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa G, your host. You're at the top of your game, yet the game is changing faster than ever. Strategies that got you here aren't the ones that'll keep you here. The pressure is relentless, and the fear of obsolescence looms large. That's why I'm here. Welcome to the new podcast series, Disruptive: How to Be Gritty and Unlock Performance in Business, Mindset, Wellness, and Success, to help you master disruption. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest has sat on 74 boards or even more than that, I think, coined a trademark role that no one else in the world holds, and spent 40 years being the most powerful person in the room that nobody outside the room ever knew about. Please welcome the only Dennis Cagan, Shadow CEO.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate the introduction. I might save it and play it for some of my kids later.
Well, I'm definitely going to have you save this because I really enjoyed meeting you. Before we even get into the Shadow CEO concept, I have to tell you, I Googled Shadow CEO before our call, and your name is literally the only thing that comes up. So, how does it even feel to own an entire category that nobody else knows even existed?
Well, I'm not sure. It's between defining it for people and trying to keep other people from using it improperly, because I have the trademark now. So I have to try and enforce that and keep other people from using it. So I try to do it as politely as possible. But I have found it very useful. So I will say that, and it does explain what I do, and so I appreciate it. It wasn't my idea; it was sort of two other people came up with the idea. One of them started calling me that, and then the other one said to me one day, "Well, have you trademarked that?" And I said, "Well, no." They said, "Well, if you're not going to trademark it, I will." I said, "No, no, I'm going to do it tonight, actually." And so I trademarked it. So I owe it to those other two people, the one that thought it up and the one that suggested trademarking it, but it's ended up being very beneficial.
And just for our audience who may be not familiar with this trademark term, do you want to unpack it a little bit? Just a brief definition of what even a shadow CEO.
It originated when I stepped in and as what this client termed his shadow CEO, because he was facing some challenges. He was running a $2 billion a year company, but he was facing some challenges. He was going to be doing some things that he had never done before, and he was looking for a consultant that could walk him through side by side, work with him to do those things, to accomplish those goals that he had never done before. So I became the shadow CEO of in this particular case, it was a $2 billion a year computer manufacturer. And that's how it originated. It's really using my experience, many of my mistakes, to help somebody else in a role that they're unfamiliar with. Even if they've built the company up to a certain size, whatever they're facing now, whether it's good or bad, they've just never faced before. And to the extent that my mistakes and my experience can be a benefit to them to keep them from making the same mistakes and helping them be successful, that's what the Shadow CEO is about.
I love that. I mean, we've all made mistakes and learned that way, hopefully. And I know when I first met you and we were talking about doing the podcast on our pre-call, that you told me a story I've not been able to stop thinking about with the chalk mark story. So tell it exactly the way you told it to me.
Okay, and this is a little bit of a condensed version, and you can Google or AI a number of different versions, but this one is the one I believe to be the most accurate of what actually happened. And so Henry Ford was building automobiles, and he had a machine that stamped out big machine that stamped out parts, and the machine wasn't working right. It was just wasn't producing the right product, right kind of parts. There were errors, and he tried to get his engineers to fix the machine, and his engineers couldn't get it working right. So he called what he thought was the engineer in the country at the time, a guy named Charles Steinmetz, who worked for GE, chief engineer for GE, and he hired Steinmetz as a consultant. So Steinmetz comes in and Ford says, I need you to get this machine running for me. So Steinmetz looks at the machine and walks around the machine and jots a couple of notes. And then he says to Ford's engineers, please bring me a ladder and a piece of chalk. This is the short version of the story. So they come back with a ladder, and Steinmetz walks up the ladder, and at the top of the machine, he finds the right spot, and he puts an X with a chalk mark. He comes down and he says to Ford's engineers, under that X, if you open it up, there's some electrical coils. Just take X number of winds off the coils, button it back up, and the machine should work just fine. So they were amazed, but they did what he said, and the machine hummed to life, and everything was working perfectly. So he sends Ford a bill for $10,000. So Ford calls him and says, what the heck is this? $10,000 for making a chalk mark? And Steinmetz says, I'm sorry, sir. Let me just send you an itemized bill. So he sends him a revised bill that says chalk mark, $1. Knowing where to put chalk mark, $9,999.
I love that story.
And it has a dual meaning. One is for consultants. For consultants, it's not about the chalk mark. It's not about what you're telling people to do. It's knowing what to tell them to do, and bringing all your knowledge and experience together to precisely give them the guidance that's going to be most applicable. So that story is about consultants. It also can be about AI in that, and I'll tell you one other thing about AI that I mentioned earlier, but the thing about this is it's the right kind of prompt to get the most accurate answer you can out of a large language model AI. And if you just say, what's the such and such, it's going to give you a very nebulous, maybe even hallucinatory answer. But if you say, okay, here's the situation, here's how I want to frame it, here's what I'm looking for, so give me an answer that tells me about this and this and this, the more complete your query is, the better answer you're going to get. So it's not about just asking AI, where do I put the chalk mark? It's about telling AI enough so that it knows how to tell you where to put the chalk mark. Right. The other thing that I mentioned to you about AI, which I think is people remembering, is everybody's always telling you these days, learn AI, learn AI, learn AI. What I'm telling people these days is you need AI to learn you. If you're in many different professions, you need to educate AI about yourself, because when people look for certain answers that you may want to be included in those answers, if AI doesn't know anything about you, then it can't give you as the correct answer to a question. So the more you can upload about yourself, the more you can validate facts that are already on AI. Obviously, it's going to go to your LinkedIn, it's going to go to your website, it's going to look for other articles on social media and other websites that might mention you. It's going to consolidate as much as it can. Some of that may be right, some of it might be wrong, but to the extent that you take a look at what AI has on you, you add additional information like podcasts, videos, audios, articles, books that you've written, anything out there that you can put in the large language model, the more likely that if you're the correct answer, that you're the answer that's going to be given to a query from somebody on AI. So you want AI to learn about you. In the process of educating it about yourself, by the way, you also learn a little bit more about how AI works and so forth. So it serves a double purpose.
I love all of your answers because as a coach too, I feel like it's not about the $10,000 and the chalk mark. For me, in my experience, it's like also too, if people don't pay for something, they don't take your advice seriously. So you have to pay to pay attention. So there's so many different ways you could take that chalkmark story that I just loved it so much, and such an AI fan. I couldn't agree with you more that you need the SEO and you need to know that garbage in, you have to prompt AI. And so anything else you want to talk about how that pertains to your shadow CEO and what you bring to the table?
Well, the easiest way to answer that one, Lisa, is to what I tell a client sometimes if I'm short of time, and I usually take quite a bit of time with anybody that wants to talk, but I'll say, look, go on ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity and ask it what Dennis Kagan can do, to put in a few lines about what you do, what your company does, what you do, what you're interested in, and then just ask it how Dennis Kagan can help you. And AI will probably give you like 3 pages of stuff I do that might be of some help to you. So it can provide quite a shortcut in terms of somebody or educating somebody about what you do. Yeah, just ask AI and it'll tell you.
That's a great answer. I love that answer. And I know you've worked with a lot of CEOs with all the advantages in the entire world, and some just bootstrap, maybe no advantages. Is there any character traits or things that you've noticed that makes people succeed in these disruptive times?
Well, that's interesting because there's that I've worked with that, like the one that I mentioned earlier, $2 billion company. And in this particular case, the CEO was spinning it out of another bigger company and spinning it out as a separate company. And he had never run a company that wasn't a division of the parent company. So he knew there were going to be things he would be facing that he didn't ever have to do before. But then on the other hand, you've got a CEO that's starting a company. They've got an idea. It's a startup. It's written on the back of a napkin. They've never done anything. They're an entrepreneur. This first one was more of a manager than an entrepreneur, more of an operator and a manager than the founder or an entrepreneur. And so each one of those are different fundamental characteristics. Now, these days, I still work with both, but many of my clients tend to be earlier stage companies. And so they tend to be more entrepreneurial, even if the company, like I've got one of my companies that I'm chairman of, is a $60 million coffee company called Bones Coffee. Bones Coffee is a $60 million company. The CEO obviously built it to be up to $60 million without hardly any help, certainly none from me. But, well, actually, it was 40 when I started helping him, but now it's 60. But anyway, but it's still, he has to be an entrepreneur. He's still breaking ground. So on the entrepreneurial side, it takes some traits. As you probably are well aware, you probably, even in your coaching, you run into people that, you've got to be persistent. You've got to be, you can't have a thin skin. You've got to be very, very disappointment tolerant. There's a lot of disappointment. You have to be resilient. You have to be, tends to help if you're a little bit more outward than inward. It's helpful if, in both cases, it's helpful if you're running a company or if you're an entrepreneur, if you have the skill of getting people aligned with the mission. That's a personality trait. It's a leadership trait, which you probably deal with, every day with your clients. But right. If you can't convince somebody of the goal that you're going for, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're running a larger company, and you may have to, have vice presidents to convince vice presidents, to convince directors, to convince managers, all the way down the line. But if you can't do that and motivate the employees, then the chances are you're not going to be particularly successful. If you're an entrepreneur and you can't convince people to come and help you for no money, I can't pay you. I can just give you some stock options. If you're not capable of convincing somebody that you are worth following and that your idea is worth pursuing with them, then you're never going to get off a dime. You're very rarely you're going to be able to do it yourself. And there's almost nobody that did everything themselves. Right. Whether it's Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Larry Ellison or Michael Dell or anybody else. And I actually have stories about many of those people, not Elon Musk, but the others I have stories about, but we won't get into that.
Oh,
So,
well, anything that's okay to share, you're welcome to share because I love that what you're talking about is really true influence and true leadership. And without that, it's like a leader who goes outside for a walk. I heard this quote, and if no one's following them, then you're not a leader.
well, I tell you, the one thing that came up earlier in our discussion before we started the podcast is a lot of people have ideas. I have a daughter, 30 daughter, my second to the youngest daughter, has an idea a minute.
Right.
Oh, I'm going to do that. Oh, I'm going to do that. And she's like all over the map. And she even actually tries and gets started to do some of her ideas, and
Yeah.
some of them get a little further along. Some of them even get modestly successful. But every one of her ideas is the thing she's ever heard of.
Yeah.
And so there are entrepreneurs out there that have plenty of ideas. The idea in starting a company today is the least important factor.
Oh, really?
The least important factor. Because what I tell people, and this has been evolving now for a number of years, as solutions have gotten more ubiquitous, as the internet has made all information available to everybody at just about the same time, we're almost to what I call a state of perfect information, where everybody in the world knows pretty much everything that everybody else knows at pretty much about the same time, or at least they can find it out if they have, a terminal and internet and AI or Google. Okay, so the idea, and what I tell people is, the minute you have an idea, there's a good chance that at that exact moment, there's 10 people in 10 different countries that just had exactly the same idea. So what the heck is separating those that can turn that idea into something like Elon Musk has done? He wasn't the first person to come up with electric engines or electric cars or space travel or anything. Why? Okay, it comes down to the following. Number one, what do we have available? Do they have
Right.
access to capital? Do they have access to legal resources, financial resources? Do they even know a software programmer? Do they even know a hardware engineer or whatever's necessary to build their product? The resources. Obviously, if you're in New York City or LA or Dallas or whatever, you have access to certain resources.
Right.
Now you're in the middle of the Africans. What resources do you have access to? Or are you in the middle of China, not in Beijing, but in the middle of the farming part of China? What resources, or wherever you are, what resources are available to you? And if you've got access to the resources, then the last factor is your execution.
Yes.
You have a great idea and you've got plenty of resources, but you're really crappy at executing something, motivating people, convincing those resources to participate, and bless you, and executing the idea. In the end, the execution becomes the most important part of it.
I love it. Yeah. Execution is everything, isn't it?
And you can buy as often tell people it's I've heard other people say it, B idea with an A team than an A idea with a B team.
Wow. I love that.
Okay,
So
because
who you surround yourself with on your team as well.
that's right. That actually leads into something that we talk about, because you were asking about disruptive times.
Yes,
So,
I love that topic.
and how to deal with disruption, how to, I hate to say it, but plan for disruption, or at least allow for disruption, or be able to respond to disruption. And it's interesting because over the last decade, we've seen any number of business model disruption. Actually, the last 2 decades, to be technical. Amazon, right. Uber, Airbnb. I mean, there's all kinds of complete disruption of former business models.
Right.
Okay. Actually, I just read something not too long ago about railroads. It was a completely different disruptive business model for transportation. Okay.
Right.
But what business were they in? The railroad business or the transportation business? How did they get from the railroad to aircraft to whatever else, cars and so forth. So one thing I say about disruption is when I would previously I would get ask advice about boards, and I would people, if you are in an industry that has not yet been disrupted, one of the things you can do is get somebody on your board of directors that comes from an industry that was disrupted.
Yeah.
Because they may not know anything about your business, but they may recognize, with a little bit of education, they may recognize some of the signs that your business model may be becoming obsolete. And if you don't disrupt it, somebody else may. Okay. So what that leads back to is my primary advice about dealing with disruption is getting advice.
Yeah.
But getting advice from the right sources. You anybody anything, and chances are they'll give you advice, whether they know squat about it or not. They will give you advice. Oh, well, I think you ought to do this, or well, do that. They may know nothing about it. When somebody comes to me and they say, well, I've gotten somebody told me that I should do this, whatever it is. First thing I'll say is, who told you that? What's their background? What's their job? What's their education? What's their experience? What qualified them to give you advice on that particular question? Most of the time, they don't even know. Oh, I don't know. They're just a successful business person. Well, did they inherit the company from their mother, or did they build the company from scratch? That's a start. So have they been through it? Do they know what they're talking about or not? Did they go to school? Do they have a degree? Are they certified? One of my favorite examples, and I'll probably offend some of your audience, is attorneys that give business advice. They're licensed to give legal advice. If I give legal advice, an attorney's going to say, oh, no, you shouldn't be giving legal advice. You're not an attorney. You're not licensed to. Well, attorneys are licensed to give legal advice, not business advice. How did I get licensed, quote unquote, to give business advice? 60 years in business. That's right. I wear it with wrinkles on myself. That's a certificate. And so an article one time about well-meaning advice. So for example, let me just say, if you started a company in a software product, okay, are you going to ask your marketing person what language the software should be written, or what AI platform should you be using for your application? Are you going to ask your marketing person? No. You're going to ask your software expert. On the other hand, you're going to go to your software expert and say, what color do you think the logo should be? No. Those opinions are not equal.
Yes.
You need to be much more discerning taking advice from. I get so many, another good example has to do with attorneys. Well, our attorney to do this. I said, well, what's your attorney special? He's a family law. I said, oh, and he's giving mergers and acquisitions or raising capital or whatever. No, they're not. That's their area. Now, you don't want a world-class tax attorney giving you advice on family law, on a divorce. You want an M&A attorney. No. And so who you get advice from, and in the case of your disruption concept, lining up some number of advisors who have expertise in the areas that you are least knowledgeable in to back you up. Technically, that's called a board of directors or a board of advisors.
Right.
Whether you pay them or not, it's your advisory board.
I agree. I have a little board of directors I've created within AI that help me when I need advice, and know the source is such a great question. I could honestly talk to you all day long because you're such a wealth of knowledge on how to run your board of directors and how to lead through disruption and all of this shadow CEO stuff, and know who you're taking advice from. What if somebody needs a shadow CEO? Where would you suggest that somebody comes and finds you, Dennis Cagan?
I would suggest that they go on ChatGPT, put in a few lines about what they do, what their company is, what their issues are, and then ask it what I can do. And then they can then obviously they can either find me on LinkedIn, or they can go to my website, which is just Cagan Co, CAGANCO.com. or just Dennis Cagan on LinkedIn, and all my information is there. I have a pet peeve about people in the consulting business. You go to their LinkedIn profile and you click on contact information. There's nothing there. Duh.
Their marketing person needs to help them.
Part of the problem with consulting, and I'm sure you recognize this and anybody else that does it, is balancing between doing your work that pays and your pipeline full. Are you gonna actually do work that you had, or are you gonna try and find more clients? Well, I'm too busy working to find more clients. I'm too busy finding clients to do any work. So it's that kind of balance. But if people can't find you, that complicates that problem.
Well, thank you for all of this wealth of advice and just a wonderful conversation. I love the Shadow CEO story, and I will stay in touch with you.
Well, my dear, I would talk to you anytime, so feel free to follow up, and I look forward to continuing our friendship.
Thank you.